October 5th, 2002. Brandon Billings turns 18, a varsity offensive lineman celebrating his birthday with family and his girlfriend in Billings, Virginia. Hours later, he rushes out of his home, telling his mother only that he has to go. A convenience store camera captures him at 3:40 in the morning, the last time anyone sees him alive. His truck is found in a remote creek bed with evidence of multiple close-range gunshots, a violent struggle, and signs someone tried to move his body. 2 decades later, no one has been convicted, and the most inexplicable part of this unsolved murder is not who pulled the trigger, it is what made Brandon walk out that door. Brandon Billings grew up in a house where the front door was always open to neighbors, teammates, and childhood friends. His parents, Kyle and Sherry, built their lives around small-town routines in Billings, Virginia. Kyle, a long-haul truck driver, often joked that Brandon could carry a hay bale in each hand before he was old enough to drive. Sherry, who managed the home, remembers her son as gentle but stubborn, the kind of boy who would shovel a neighbor's walk before he would ever ask for help himself. Football was more than a pastime for Brandon. It was a family tradition. Every Friday night in the fall, the Billingses loaded up the family truck with coolers and blankets, heading to Billings High's stadium. Brandon wore number 67, anchoring the offensive line. Coaches recall him as a quiet leader, the sort who would lift a teammate up after a tough play and never take credit for a win. His size was imposing, but his reputation was built on kindness. Teachers and classmates described him as steady and reliable, a friend who would stick around after practice to help clean up the field or offer a ride home. At home, Brandon's world revolved around family meals and late-night conversations at the kitchen table. He shared inside jokes with his father about truck repairs, and he would tease his mother about her overcooked birthday cakes. Friends dropped by unannounced, knowing there would be leftovers and laughter. The Billings house was a gathering point during football season, with the front porch crowded by teammates and the living room filled with stories from the week's game. Birthdays were a big deal. For his 18th, Sherry decorated the kitchen with streamers and set out Brandon's favorite chocolate cake. His father gave him a new set of tools, a nod to the hours they had spent fixing up the old Ford in the driveway. The warmth of that weekend, the easy banter, and the sense of belonging lingered in the house long after the guests left. In those moments, Brandon was just a son, a teammate, and a friend, rooted in the rhythms of a family that expected many more ordinary days together. Turning 18 in Billings, Virginia, meant more than just a number. For Brandon Billings, it meant a kitchen full of friends and family, laughter bouncing off the walls, and a chocolate cake waiting on the counter. The photos from that weekend show a tall teenager in a party hat, one arm slung around his mother, the other around his girlfriend, her smile caught somewhere between shy and proud. In a small town where everyone knows your birthday, celebrations spill over from family tables to high school hallways and back again. Brandon's girlfriend, a year younger and just as quiet, appears in snapshots pressed close to his side, her hand tucked into his. She brought him a card with a hand-drawn football on the front, the kind of gift that gets pinned to a bulletin board and left there for months. Friends drifted in and out of the Billings house all weekend, dropping off gifts or just stopping by to share a slice of cake. The front porch, usually crowded on game nights, held the same mix of teammates and neighbors, their voices rising and falling as dusk settled over the yard. Brandon's parents snapped pictures of him opening a new set of tools, a practical gift for a boy who spent weekends under the hood of his truck. There were no smartphones to capture every moment, just a digital camera passed from hand to hand and a few rolls of film that would not be developed until weeks later. Text messages were rare, and most plans were made face-to-face, with the expectation that everyone would show up sooner or later. The weekend felt ordinary in all the best ways. There were late-night drives along back roads, music turned up, windows down, and the comfort of knowing that everyone who mattered was close by. The last photos of Brandon from that birthday show him laughing, arms linked with friends, no hint of worry in his eyes. In those frames, The future looks as wide open as the fields beyond the edge of town. No one knew how quickly that sense of safety would slip away, or how these simple moments would become the memories everyone would hold on to when the world changed overnight. Dinner at Jason Cole's house was the kind of gathering that happened almost every Friday night after a home game. Brandon, still in his Galax High jersey, dropped his gear by the door and made his way to the kitchen, where the usual crowd of teammates and friends had already started raiding the fridge. Jason's mother set out plates of pizza and homemade cookies, while the boys replayed highlights from the field, each story getting bigger with every telling. The air in the kitchen buzzed with the easy comfort of routines, the kind that only come from years of shared victories and losses. Brandon did not stand out at first. He was quieter than some, listening more than talking, but he smiled when someone teased him about his birthday haul. Jason remembers Brandon as relaxed, hungry, and in no hurry to leave. He laughed at the same old jokes and, for a while, seemed content to let the evening drift. A couple of friends peeled off early, but Brandon stayed behind, helping clear the table and stacking empty cans in the recycling bin. Jason later told police that nothing felt out of place, no arguments, no tension, just the familiar rhythm of a small-town Friday night. The timeline starts to blur after dinner. Receipts from a local burrito cafe show that Brandon used his card to pay for 2 large meals at 8:45 p.m., but Jason's statement puts them at his house closer to 9:15 p.m. No one remembers exactly when the group broke up, but Jason's written account suggests Brandon was still there as late as 10 p.m. What stands out in Jason's memory is the way Brandon lingered by the door, keys in hand, as if weighing whether to call it a night or keep moving. When asked later, Jason could not recall any talk of specific plans or destinations, just a vague mention that Brandon said he needed to clear his head. Brandon's mother, Sherry, would later say she heard her son's heavy footsteps in the hallway not long after. He ducked into his room for a few minutes, then re-emerged, jacket slung over his arm. He told her only that he was heading out, not to wait up. The clock in the kitchen read a little after 10 p.m. Sherry watched him walk out to the driveway, the porch light catching the side of his face as he looked back and gave a quick wave. There was no sense of urgency, no sign that anything was wrong. What happened in the hours that followed remains a puzzle. The next confirmed detail comes from transaction records. An ATM withdrawal of $120 at 1:05 a.m. from a branch in Independence. The bank's settlement report lists Brandon's account number and the withdrawal amount, but offers no clue about what prompted the stop or who, if anyone, was with him. A gas purchase at a nearby station at 2:10 a.m. matches his truck's fuel card, suggesting he was preparing for a longer drive, but the surveillance logs from the station were never released. Friends who saw Brandon that night describe him as steady, even-keeled, and not the type to seek out trouble. Jason Cole's recollection of their dinner, the laughter, the easy conversation, the way Brandon took his time saying goodbye, has been repeated in police interviews and community forums for years. It is a snapshot of normalcy that stands in sharp contrast to the confusion that would follow. As the night wore on and Brandon's journey took him farther from home, the ordinary details of that dinner became the last sure anchor in a timeline that would soon unravel. A little after 3:30 in the morning, a traffic camera on US 58 snapped a single frame, a blue Ford F-150 heading west, headlights cutting through the darkness. The timestamp read 3:38 in the morning. The truck's make and model matched the one registered to Brandon Billings. Just 2 minutes later, at 3:40 in the morning, a convenience store clerk along the same stretch of highway logged a brief encounter with a tall teenager in a varsity jacket. The clerk, working the graveyard shift, remembered the boy's size and the way he kept glancing over his shoulder as he bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. The store's CCTV system recorded the time, 3:40 in the morning sharp, before the boy stepped back out into the night. That sighting would become the last confirmed moment anyone could place Brandon alive and alone. The store clerk's account was clear and consistent, even months later, and the time-stamped footage left no room for doubt. Investigators later compared the traffic camera image with the store's video and found the same faded sticker on the rear window, confirming the truck's identity. The two data points, 338 and 340, locked Brandon's location on the westbound trail, moving away from Independence and toward the rural outskirts. At 4:05 in the morning, a tow truck driver entered a new log into his company's dispatch system. The call had come in as a routine report, an abandoned vehicle on the shoulder of US 58, about half a mile west of the convenience store. The truck's engine was cold, the doors unlocked. The driver's report included a GPS ping, matching the location to a bend in the road near a narrow creek bed. He did not see anyone nearby and found no sign of an accident, just a vehicle left behind in the pre-dawn quiet. The tow log, time-stamped and GPS verified, gave investigators a hard endpoint for Brandon's journey that night. Between the traffic camera at 3:38, the store clerk's statement and video at 3:40, and the tow company's 4:05 entry, the timeline narrows to less than 30 minutes. The physical evidence, surveillance images, electronic logs, and a written witness account form a chain that no rumor or speculation could break. These timestamps became the backbone of the official investigation, anchoring the night's events in verifiable fact. Questions remain about what happened in the minutes between Brandon leaving the convenience store and his truck being found abandoned. The westbound route he took was familiar to most local teens, leading toward the New River and a handful of rural pull-offs known for late-night gatherings. No other vehicles were captured on camera in that window, and no witnesses reported seeing a struggle or hearing gunfire. The only emergency call logged before sunrise was a 3:55 in the morning report of a possible hit and run, but dispatchers noted the caller could not provide a license plate or clear description. The store clerk's memory, the traffic camera's silent witness, and the tow log's precision together offer a rare clarity in a case defined by uncertainty. They confirm Brandon's movement west in the early hours, place his truck at a specific spot on US 58, and leave a gap of just 25 minutes where everything changed. The rest of the night, the violence, the struggle, the reason Brandon was there at all, remains locked in those missing minutes, beyond the reach of timestamp or camera lens. The Ford F-150 rested at a slant, its rear wheels buried deep in the muddy shoulder, the front end dipping into the creek bed. Tire impressions cut sharply across the saturated ground, their abrupt stop at the water's edge hinting at more than a careless slide. Metal rivets and gravel clung to the treads, pressed in by spinning wheels, signs of a struggle for traction, or perhaps a forced descent. Scene analysts moved carefully, preserving the tire tracks and the scattered debris that told the first part of the story. Inside the cab, disorder reigned. The driver's seatbelt was sliced cleanly near the buckle, the frayed edge unmistakable. The right side armrest, torn from its bracket, exposed yellow foam. Receipts and coins littered the floor, while the glove compartment hung open and its contents spilled across the seat. A faint gasoline odor mingled with the sharp scent of blood, settling over the scene. A white shirt, stained and crumpled, lay on the bench seat. Near the center console, a large flat rock sat wedged in place, its top streaked with dried blood. Forensic analysis would later confirm the rock's soil matched the creek bed clay, but the blood was human. Its placement, unnatural, deliberate, raised questions about its role. Metal rivets, identical to those in the rear tires, were scattered near the footwell, possibly tracked in from a nearby construction site or left behind during the struggle. The ignition key remained in the off position. The gear shift sat in neutral, not park, a detail that caught the lead investigator's eye. With the engine cold and the truck at rest, neutral suggested the vehicle may have been rolled or moved after stopping, not simply parked. The driver's window bore smeared fingerprints, as if hands had pressed against the glass from inside. Scene analysts documented each detail, measuring distances and collecting evidence. Muddy footprints led away from the driver's door, their pattern broken by standing water. On the riverbank, a wallet lay half buried in silt, its contents damp and scattered. Each item, the shirt, the rock, the torn armrest, was bagged for testing. The evidence from the truck and its surroundings formed the basis for later analysis, raising the question: was the chaos inside the result of violence, a hurried cover-up, or careful staging? The physical clues pointed to a scene that was anything but accidental. The autopsy on Brandon Billings began in the early morning hours of October 7, 2002, at the Virginia office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The pathologist's report cataloged 4 distinct gunshot wounds and a pattern of trauma that told a story more complex than a single act of violence. 2 entrance wounds were mapped on the right side of Brandon's chest, just below the collarbone, each with a corresponding exit wound on the left posterior thorax. The bullet paths ran at a downward angle, passing through the upper chest cavity and exiting near the shoulder blade. Both wounds showed heavy stippling, tiny burns, and embedded gunpowder, indicating the shots were fired from less than 1 foot away, likely between 6 and 12 inches. Microscopic soot deposits were found inside the nasal cavity and around the edges of one entrance wound, a classic sign of a near-contact discharge. A third gunshot entered the upper abdomen, tracking laterally and lodging deep within the muscle near the lower left rib. The bullet remained in place, recovered during the autopsy, and later matched to a .38 caliber revolver. The pathologist noted that this wound would have caused internal bleeding, but was not immediately fatal. The fourth wound, smaller and less ragged, pierced the left scapular region, passing through soft tissue and exiting cleanly. All 4 wounds displayed a tight grouping, suggesting the shots were delivered in rapid succession from close range, likely within the confined space of the truck's cab. Defensive residue was found on Brandon's right hand, traces of burned powder and metallic particles consistent with grabbing at the barrel or shielding his chest. The skin along his knuckles was abraded, with shallow cuts and bruising that matched the torn fabric of his shirt and the rough texture of the truck's interior. The medical examiner also documented a subgaleal hematoma over the left temple, a deep bruise beneath the scalp, likely caused by a heavy blunt object. The report described the wound edges as irregular, with embedded fragments of clay and gravel, matching the blood-streaked rock found on the truck's seat. Taken together, the autopsy findings laid out a sequence: blunt force trauma to the head, then a volley of close-range gunshots, at least one while Brandon's body was angled defensively. The evidence of gunpowder on his hand, the tight wound grouping, and the bullet lodged near the rib all pointed to a violent struggle inside the vehicle. The pathologist's notes made clear that the chest wounds were immediately lethal, but the trauma to the head and the presence of defensive residue suggested Brandon fought for his life in the final moments. The medical examiner's language was clinical, but the details left little doubt about the violence and proximity of the attack. Rain during the night turned the creek bed into a churn of mud and shallow pools. Investigators traced a set of footprints leading from the driver's side door, but the pattern vanished where the water pooled deepest. By the time the forensic team arrived, the rising current and steady drizzle had erased whatever tracks remained, leaving only partial impressions pressed into the bank. A single tread mark, broad and deep, suggested a heavy boot, but no cast could be made before the water swept it away. The loss of those prints closed off a line of inquiry that might have mapped Brandon's final steps, or those of someone else, away from the truck. Downstream, a fisherman casting for trout the next morning spotted a wallet bobbing in an eddy, half submerged and wedged against a fallen branch. Inside, the driver's license bore Brandon's name. The bills were sodden, the ink on the receipts running in blue and black streaks. Investigators logged the wallet's location nearly 60 yards from the truck, raising questions about how it traveled that distance. Hydrologists later examined the creek's flow and determined that while a strong current could carry debris downstream, the wallet's condition suggested it had not been in the water long. The possibility that it was thrown or placed there, rather than lost by accident, could not be ruled out. The wallet's recovery offered a rare physical link between the truck and the water's edge, but the chain of custody began with a civilian, not law enforcement. That gap, minutes or hours unaccounted for, meant any trace evidence on the wallet might have been washed away or contaminated before it reached police hands. DNA swabs and fingerprint dusting turned up little. The only mark of note was a faint thumbprint, too smudged for identification. The obliterated footprints and the wallet's journey downstream stand out as missed opportunities. If the tracks had been preserved, or the wallet found sooner, the evidence might have drawn a clearer map of that night's movements. Instead, these clues became questions: how many people left the truck, who handled the wallet, and whether the water erased more than just physical traces. Each lost detail added weight to the burden investigators would carry into the next phase, where every missing answer became another hurdle for the case to clear. In the spring of 2010, nearly 8 years after Brandon Billings was killed, a new name surfaced in the investigation: Simone. Until then, the case had drifted on rumors and dead ends, with no clear suspect and no confession. But in May 2010, Tammy Simone contacted law enforcement with a story she said she had kept to herself for years. According to her statement, on the morning of October 6, 2002, the day Brandon's body was discovered, she awoke around 5 in the morning to the sound of her then-boyfriend, Chad Reeves, frantically counting a large sum of cash in their shared apartment. Simone claimed that Reeves was agitated and later, while pacing the living room, confessed to shooting someone, insisting he had killed the wrong person. She described details that matched elements of the crime scene, including the presence of a truck and the use of a handgun. Simone's account was recorded in a formal statement on May 8, 2010, and quickly became the most significant lead in the case since the original investigation stalled years before. Investigators took Simone's claims seriously, reopening the file and tracing her connections to Reeves and his known associates. They cross-checked her version of events against the original timeline, looking for overlaps and inconsistencies. Simone's statement mentioned another man, George Harper III, who she said had been with Reeves that night. Both men, according to Simone, were involved in local drug activity and had access to firearms. Detectives began to re-interview witnesses from 2002, seeking any reference to Harper or Reeves in the weeks before or after Brandon's death. As the investigation gained momentum, police turned to Patricia Davis, a family friend who had seen Brandon at the convenience store in the early hours of October 6, 2002. In July 2012, Davis was shown a photo lineup that included George Harper's image. She identified Harper as the man she remembered seeing with Brandon that night, describing his build and clothing in detail. Her identification added a second thread tying Harper to the crime, strengthening the case against both men. Police documented Davis's statement and included it with Simone's written claim, assembling a package of evidence for the grand jury. The case file, now thick with new interviews and forensic reviews, was presented to a Grayson County grand jury in the fall of 2013. On October 22nd, the panel returned indictments against Chad Allen Reeves and George Albert Harper III. Both were charged with first-degree murder, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and conspiracy to commit murder. The indictments were announced publicly in January 2014, bringing the case back into the spotlight and ending more than a decade of official silence. The path from tip to indictment was neither quick nor straightforward. Investigators weighed Simone's credibility, revisited physical evidence, and tried to reconcile the timeline she described with the forensic facts. The grand jury's decision to indict reflected not only the content of Simone's confession claim, but also the corroboration provided by Davis's eyewitness identification and the circumstantial links to the two accused men. As the charges were read, the families of both the victim and the accused prepared for a courtroom confrontation that would test the strength of the state's evidence and the reliability of its star witness. For the first time since 2002, the Billings family faced the possibility of answers. The indictments offered a measure of hope, but also opened the door to years of legal maneuvering and new uncertainties. The case, once cold, now moved toward trial, driven by the words of a witness who claimed to have lived with the truth for nearly a decade, and by the determination of investigators who refused to let the story end with silence. Courtroom seats filled quickly on the morning of Chad Reeves's trial, with the Billings family on one side and the accused men's relatives on the other. The prosecution began by calling Tammy Simone, whose testimony had revived the case after nearly 8 years. She described waking in the early hours of October 6, 2002, to find Reeves counting a wad of cash, his hands shaking. According to her statement, he confessed to shooting someone, insisting, "I killed the wrong person." The details she gave about a truck, a handgun, and a frantic mood mirrored elements from the original crime scene. Prosecutors pressed the point. Simone's account placed Reeves at the center of the killing, with knowledge only the perpetrator could possess. Defense attorneys countered by questioning Simone's motives and memory. They pointed to the years she waited before coming forward and suggested her story had changed over time. The defense team highlighted gaps in her recollection, what Reeves wore, the exact words he used, and how much money was counted. They asked whether she had been influenced by rumors in town or by pressure from investigators. Simone's answers, at times hesitant, left the jury with more questions than certainty. Next, the prosecution called Patricia Davis, who had identified George Harper in a photo lineup as the man seen with Brandon at the convenience store that night. Davis's testimony was steady, but the defense seized on inconsistencies. They noted that her initial statement, given years earlier, had not mentioned Harper by name. On cross-examination, Davis admitted she had only a brief look at the man's face and that the store was poorly lit. The defense argued that memory fades and that Davis's identification could not be trusted as definitive proof. Physical evidence took center stage. Prosecutors introduced forensic reports on the bullets recovered from Brandon's body, linking them to a .38 caliber revolver. But when pressed for a direct connection, the state's experts conceded that the weapon itself had never been found in Reeves's or Harper's possession. No fingerprints from either man appeared on the truck, the rock, or the wallet. DNA analysis was inconclusive, with partial profiles that could not exclude multiple contributors. The prosecution acknowledged the absence of a clear physical link between the accused and the crime scene, relying instead on circumstantial threads. The defense framed the state's case as a patchwork of hearsay and coincidence. They argued that the timeline, built on witness statements and transaction logs, left wide gaps. The defense highlighted the lack of surveillance footage showing Reeves or Harper near Brandon's truck that night. They pointed to the missing weapon, the absence of bloodstains on either suspect's clothing, and the inability to place them at the creek bed during the critical window. In closing arguments, they reminded jurors that doubt remained at every turn. Late in the proceedings, Chad Reeves was called to the stand. Advised by counsel, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right, refusing to answer questions about his whereabouts or actions on the night of the murder. The courtroom grew tense as the judge instructed the jury not to interpret his silence as guilt. For many watching, the moment underscored the limits of the case, the unanswered questions, the evidence that slipped away, and the burden of proof that remained unmet. After days of testimony and hours of deliberation, the jury returned without a conviction. The judge declared a mistrial, and the case was left unresolved. As families filed out of the courthouse, the Billingses faced the same uncertainty that had haunted them for years. The trial had exposed the weaknesses in the evidence, the fragility of memory, and the challenges of finding truth in a case shaped by time and loss. The murder of Brandon Billings remained officially unsolved, its answers still out of reach. Today, Brandon's case remains unsolved, a stark reminder that justice can stall even in plain sight. As new forensic technologies reshape cold case investigations nationwide, hope endures that answers may still surface. Yet for every family left waiting, the cost is measured in years stolen by silence. In the end, a community's memory is only as strong as its determination to seek truth. Share your thoughts and join the conversation below.